Be sure to follow us on Instagram at CriminalAFPod or click on the link in the episode description. On the nights of August 9th and August 10th, 1969, members of a cult known as the Family brutally murdered 7 innocent people, leaving a scene so chaotic, authorities had trouble connecting the murders, despite their similarities. The true motives for these heinous crimes have led to numerous conspiracies and theories, including the prosecution's theory of creating a race war they dubbed Helter Skelter. I'm Dave Jari.
I'm Garrett Corder.
And this is Criminal as Fuck.
That is Criminal as Fuck.
What's good, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Criminal AF. Once again, I am Dave Jari, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Garrett Corder.
How we doing?
We'd like to give a shout-out once again to Lucy out in Yass, New South Wales. Yesterday, I received a care package all the way from Australia with a couple of koozies, keep our beers cold, a bag that says a great piece of Yass. Thank you so much, Lucy, and for sending us these little keepsakes from your hometown. It means so much to us. We'll post some pics on Instagram. For the record, other than TikTok, myself and Garrett are the ones who admin all of our social media. On TikTok, it's myself and our friend at His Chaos, who I may add has been doing an amazing job getting us to nearly 10,000 followers. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the reason I say this is because most of the popular podcasts out there have social media teams who monitor their social media. But that is one thing that we will never give up on because we value in building relationships with real people. And in return, we want you to have all the confidence that you are speaking directly to who you think you are talking to.
Yes.
Since we have been doing this, we've made some meaningful friendships with people across the world. And some are actually shocked to receive a message back from me, expecting some random admin, so.
It's amazing. We love our fans, especially the diehards.
Yes. So
the best fans in the world.
So please feel free, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, message us, even if it's just to say hi, and it will be us saying hello back, guaranteed. Just wanted to throw that out there.
I am so excited for this episode.
Oh yeah,
it's my favorite.
This is you've been waiting for this.
It's my favorite murders. It's everything. It's sexy. It's got a little bit of everything.
It's a little bit of everything.
Yes, conspiracy theories, CIA. Murders, cults, a crazy individual. It's amazing. I love it.
Before we get into that, for those of you just joining us for the first time, this is a true crime podcast. There will be talk of murder, rape, assault. I don't know where I'm going. There will be talk of murder, rape, torture, assault, and pretty much any crime that would haunt your nightmares at any given moment. There will be detailed descriptions of said events, and there will be some vulgar language.
Like fuck.
Yes, like fuck. Of course, like fuck. Because I fucking love fuck. Now, we understand that Criminal AF is not for everyone, but we just ask that you at least give it a listen. If it's not for you, hey, thanks for checking it out. But if it is,
welcome to the debauchery. We are going to kick things off with Florida Man of the Day. Florida man, 47, arrested after threatening to shoot his parents who refused to give him money to buy aerosol spray for his huffing habit.
The fucking nerve of those. Oh, my God.
Mom!
God, Mom. God. I just want to huff some paint.
We gotta
You never let me do anything.
We gotta put this guy's mugshot on Instagram. We have to. If you're gonna tell me, describe a huffer to the T, that's that man.
Oh my God, yeah.
That is that man. All right. A man was arrested on Saturday after Marco Island police. There's so many interesting town names in Florida.
There are.
It's very, because you can get the nice ones, Palm Bay, all these spots, and then there's like random Fruitland, from last episode.
Yeah. Orange Tree, Florida.
Yeah, Orange Tree, Orange Blossom, all right.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
A man was arrested on Saturday after Marco Island police say he threatened to shoot family members and led officers on a vehicle pursuit. According to Marco Island Police Department, James Lang, 47, was arrested after MIPD responded to a 911 call on Saturn Court. the caller reported that Lang threatened to shoot household members. This dispute began when Lang asked his parents for money so he could buy a can of aerosol spray for his huffing habit.
I swear to God, if I don't get a paint can right now, I'll fucking shoot all of you.
I just need one aerosol can, please. As officers arrived, they saw Lang speeding away from the residence. A short vehicle pursuit ensued. Of course, it was short. The guy was fucked up on a can of aerosol. You can't drive on that shit. But Lang returned to his home after losing a tire on his vehicle. Oh, he almost made it.
Oh, so
Officers
close.
conducted a felony traffic stop and found a loaded 9mm handgun and around 7
Oh, he wasn't kidding.
Yeah, and around 7 cans of dust-off aerosol spray in the car. MIPD says Lang has an extensive criminal history in Collier County and is currently on state probation. He was taken into custody and transported to Naples Jail Center. Lang faces charges of fleeing and eluding law officers with emergency lights on, sirens activated, aggravated assault with intent to commit a felony, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and violation of state probation.
Jesus.
Hey,
Imagine if he shows up in court and they're like, how do you plead? He's like, not guilty. And he's got fucking like
the gold
fuchsia.
Well, no, it's the gold. I'm telling you, I've watched. I watched
gold on his face.
I've watched a 60 minutes documentary about paint huffing.
Yeah.
And it's wild. For some reason they all have gold sprayed on them because I guess whatever is in the gold is the best one.
That's the good shit.
It's the good shit. It's the best stuff. And it's terrifying too when you see somebody inactive. I remember if anybody who's listening has seen
you just
this
made it sound really good. I think I might go try it now, man.
You don't want to. Trust me.
The way you just talked it up.
Trust me. You don't want to try it. Well, don't trust me, but I've never huffed paint or huffed anything.
Oh, you stay away from that gold.
Trust me, that gold speckle. Woo, no. I trust me from watching this documentary, and if anybody's seen it, I'm telling you, it stuck with them. It was 2 twins who were homeless in the back of an alley, and it was on an episode of 60 Minutes or something like that. And these guys, they're completely out of it. They had no clue who they were. They basically huffed themselves.
It's crazy.
They basically huffed themselves to a point where they have no recollection of who they are, where anything is. They're just falling over. They got scabs and bruises all over them because they can't even move. It's actually a very sad drug addiction.
And this is like for life.
Oh yeah, you're because you're destroying your brain cells. Yeah. It's a very sad drug addiction. It's normally homeless people do it because it's cheap.
Oh. Thanks for being a buzzkill.
Sorry, I'm just putting out facts. I'm just saying, when you're at a party and somebody gives you a can of fucking spray paint, don't take it. Just say no.
I had all these jokes lined up.
Just say no.
Fucking...
I bet you that guy can smell across the fucking town, though. And we're back. All right.
We're back.
All right. Well, let's get into this episode because I'm very excited.
Okay. All right. So for this episode, like what we're going to do is we're going to do things a little different. So rather than what we usually do is break it down chapter by chapter, we'll introduce the key characters in the story, what roles they played in the family, events leading up to the infamous Tate and LaBianca murders. And then we'll go in a bit of a detail on, what these individuals were like, before and during their time with the family. So without further ado, this is part 1 of a multi-episode special on Charles Manson titled The Family. Charlie was furious. The crew he sent out the night before were supposed to be his best, but they fucked it all up. They were sloppy, chaotic, and there was no way anyone would believe that an organized group like the Black Panthers would be the ones to pull this fiasco off. His plan of creating a race war, where he and his followers would come out as leaders of the New World, had to go off without a hitch. He told his people that they would need to go out again tonight, and this time, he would be there to ensure it would go according to plan. He remembered the house of an associate to the family, Harold True, located at 3267 Waverly Drive in the Los Feliz Hills section of Los Angeles. Charlie and his crew piled into the car and head out. There were a couple of occasions along the way where Charlie had thought of different targets. First, there was a priest standing outside of a church. Then there was the man who pulled alongside of them as they were driving. But Charlie decided to stick with the original plan. They pulled onto Waverly Drive and stopped outside of the house, which was located up a long driveway. Charlie and his right-hand man, Tex Watson, who spearheaded the murders the night before, exited the vehicle. walked up to the house and broke in. They quickly subdued the 2 occupants of the home, leaving the woman in the bedroom and moved the man to the living room. They promised that they were in no danger. They simply wanted to rob the place. Charlie then exited the house and walked back to the car where he instructed followers Patricia Krenwinkel and Leslie Van Houten to join Tex inside the house and murder the occupants. There was one slight wrinkle in the plan, however. The house where they were at was not that of Harold True. It was the house next door, 3301 Waverly Drive, the home of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. This is one theory of many that have added to the lore of the Manson family, but according to the prosecutor who tried the case, it's the official version. When talking about the Manson family, there are several twists and turns. Numerous characters who were in and out of a timeline that only spanned 2 years, yet you could write full stories on each of these subplots. With this episode, we will start with Charles Manson, his early life, and the people that came to form the family, followed by the prosecutor's theory of Helter Skelter, the Tate murders, and the LaBianca murders. We will end the Manson episodes with alternate theories that have gained traction over the years, such as the drug burn theory, the copycat theory, and the Revelations Chapter 9 theory. Charles Manson was born no-name Maddox on November 12, 1934, in Cincinnati, Ohio, to a promiscuous, alcoholic 16-year-old runaway named Kathleen Maddox, as his mother didn't bother to give him an actual name. After a few weeks, Kathleen's mother named him Charles Mills Maddox. Charles's father was a man that went by the name of Colonel Walker Scott, and he lived in Kathleen's hometown in Ashland, Kentucky. Manson would state that he never knew his father, but this has been disputed. Prior to his birth, his mother married a transient and soon changed Charles's last name to suit that of his stepfather. By the time Charles Manson turned 1, William and Kathleen split, and she brought Manson back to Kentucky. The first years of Manson's life were filled with neglect by his mother. She was said to work as a prostitute, performing her duties with Charles in the same room. One night, when Manson was about 3 or 4 years old, Kathleen brought him to a local pub. The waitress made a comment on how she would love to have a little boy. Manson's mother told the waitress, "He's yours for a pitcher of beer." The waitress brought Kathleen the pitcher. She guzzled it down with Manson in her lap, got up and left, with young Manson still sitting in the booth. A relative spent the next few days trying to track down Charles to bring him back to his mother. At the age of 5, his mother was sentenced to 5 years in prison for armed robbery, and Manson was shipped off to live with his grandparents and then his aunt and uncle in West Virginia. Charles would act out, be punished excessively. When Charles was 8, Kathleen returned to collect her son, but the neglect and abuse persisted. By age 10, Charles was sent to his first boys' school because his mother was deemed unfit due to her excessive drinking. He would escape these schools numerous times and ultimately find himself in a reformatory by the age of 13 after being caught robbing a grocery store. He did make an attempt at a normal life, getting married at the age of 20 to 15-year-old Rosalie Willis in January of 1955. Later that year, they moved from Ohio to Los Angeles in a stolen car, which Manson was eventually arrested for and received 5 years probation. Rosalie became pregnant and gave birth to Charles Manson Jr. while Manson was in prison for a parole violation. She would visit often during the first year of his sentence, but the visits eventually stopped as Rosalie met another man and divorced Manson in 1958. Rosalie would go on to change the name of Manson's son to Jay White after her new husband. Jay would die in 1993 from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Manson would marry again upon his release to a prostitute named Leona Stevens, and Charles would become her pimp. He was arrested again in 1960 for sex trafficking when he drove Leona and another woman into Mexico with the intention of pimping out the women. Leona would claim that she had a son by Manson, but there was no evidence to prove this beyond her claims. The rest of the decade, Manson was in and out of prisons. His crimes were mainly nonviolent, with the exception of sodomizing a boy as he held a knife to his throat. After serving his term for forging a stolen treasury check worth less than $40, Charles Manson was scheduled for release from prison on March 21, 1967. He begged prison officials to keep him locked up because prison was his home. Unable to do so, he was released. Manson, along with the guitar he had learned to play in the penitentiary, made his way to the Haight-Ashbury section of San Francisco, the epicenter of the hippie movement in the Summer of Love. It was here, just a short time after his release, the family was created. Mary Brunner, a 23-year-old library assistant at the University of California, Berkeley, was born December 17, 1943, in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and experienced a typical Midwestern upbringing. She attended the University of Wisconsin and received a bachelor's degree in history. She was walking her dog when she met Charles Manson. Manson befriended Mary and convinced her to allow him to move into her apartment, and soon after, they became lovers. 18-year-old Lynette Fromm was born in Santa Monica, California. Her family moved to Redondo Beach when Lynette was in high school and soon began experimenting with drugs. After a falling out with her parents, Lynette ran away and found herself in Venice Beach, homeless and in a depressive state. Soon, she met Charles Manson strumming a guitar near the beach with Mary Brunner, and they began talking. She was entranced by this man's attitude and philosophies, and the three quickly became friends, moving in together in Mary's rented house at 636 Cole Street in San Francisco. By December of 1967, the family grew to 7 with the addition of Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Ella Jo Bailey, and a 14-year-old girl named Ruth Ann Morehouse. Susan Atkins was born May 7, 1948 in San Gabriel, California. She was extremely shy throughout her childhood, and as a young teenager, her mother became sick and passed from cancer. Susan's father, unable to cope with the loss of his wife, turned to alcohol and abandoned Susan and her younger brother. The two moved in with relatives, and Susan worked as a waitress while attending high school to help care for her brother. She dropped out of high school in her junior year and moved on her own to San Francisco and took a job, at first as a telemarketer, and then working at a coffee shop. It was spring of 1967 when she met Charles Manson and joined his commune. Ella Jo Bailey, who was Susan Atkins' roommate at the time of their meeting, was born in Omaha, Nebraska on January 15, 1947. There is very little known about Ella Jo's upbringing, but a picture of her was found in a Michigan high school yearbook from 1965, showing that she moved there at some point in her life. She moved to the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood shortly after graduating high school. Both she and Atkins were fascinated with Manson. Krenwinkel was born December 3, 1947, in Los Angeles. Her childhood was less than ideal. She was overweight and teased often. She eventually became addicted to diet pills and lost the weight, but she still felt ugly and unwanted. She sacrificed her virginity to a boy in her school so she could feel loved, but the boy never spoke to her again. After high school, she attended a Christian college in Alabama, but moved back to California after one semester. She moved to Manhattan Beach and took a job as a secretary and shared an apartment with her drug-addicted sister. One day after work, around September of 1967, she came home to find the apartment filled with people she did not know. Among them was Charles Manson. Manson seduced her into bed that night and showered her with compliments, telling her how beautiful she was. The self-loathing Krenwinkel was hooked on how Manson made her feel. Mary Brunner quit her job as a librarian assistant, and soon the family of 7 were traveling along the California coast into Oregon, Washington State, and Nevada, collecting followers along the way. In 1968 brought an influx of new members to the family, and by the end of the year, their commune grew to 50. Notable family members that joined during this time were Charles Tex Watson, Leslie Van Houten, Bobby Beausoleil, and Linda Kasabian. Charles Watson has been said to have been Manson's right-hand man because he was the one who led the Tate and LaBianca murders. Others give that designation to Bruce Davis, who we will speak of later in the story. Charles Watson, later known as Tex, was born on December 2nd, 1945, in Dallas, Texas. People in his hometown described him as the boy next door. He was an A student and a star athlete in high school, setting a state record in low hurdles. After high school, Tex attended college but dropped out in 1966 and moved to California. A chance meeting with a rock star would lead him to Charles Manson. Linda Kasabian was born Linda Druin on June 21st, 1949. She grew up in a small town in New Hampshire where her parents struggled financially and argued often. When she was a young child, her parents divorced and her father left town. She was described as a good student and intelligent in her high school years, but due to an unhealthy relationship with her stepfather, she quit school at the age of 16 and traveled out west to find God. During her pilgrimage, she married, divorced, and made a stop in Florida to reconcile with her father. When that fell apart, she moved to Boston, Massachusetts, where she remarried Robert Kasabian and had a daughter. Things began to sour between her and Robert, so Linda and her daughter moved back to New Hampshire to live with her mother. Robert contacted her a short time later and asked if she would move to the West Coast. Hoping to reconcile, she did, and she met Robert in Topanga Canyon. Robert wanted her to go on an expedition throughout South America with him, but because she had a young child, she declined. With Robert gone, Linda was left alone. She made friends with a woman named Catherine Scher, who told her about a group of hippies who were creating a paradise to escape the social turmoil of the day. Linda was intrigued and decided to visit this paradise, and the man responsible for it, Charles Manson. The family took advantage of the open-door policy practiced throughout the hippie movement in California, bouncing from location to location, spreading out amongst different settlements, and meeting up again when it fit their needs. Some of these locations included the Yellow Submarine, a house on Gresham Street in Canoga Park, an apartment on Clubhouse Avenue in Venice, the Spiral Staircase, an abandoned house in Topanga Canyon that served as a heroin den, where Linda Kasabian joined the family, and Barker Ranch in Death Valley, owned by a family member's grandmother. With Mary now pregnant with Manson's child, the family made their way to the Spiral Staircase to settle in for the time being. Described as having slid off its foundation, the Spiral Staircase house allegedly had a creek flowing through the first level of the home. It was plagued by an overabundance of rattlesnakes. On April 15th, 1968, it was here Mary Brunner gave birth to her and Manson's child, a boy named Valentine Michael Manson. Mary was assisted in her delivery by the other women in the family. If there was one thing that Manson was determined to do, it was to become a musician. He and his followers would bounce from place to place trying to catch a break into the music industry. It was late spring of 1968 where Manson thought his dreams would finally come true. Dennis Wilson, the drummer and founding member of the Beach Boys, was traveling through Malibu when he saw two female hitchhikers, Patricia Krenwinkel and Ella Jo Bailey. He picked them up and drove them to their destination. About a month later, he saw Patricia and Ella Jo hitchhiking again. But this time, Wilson brought the two women to his house at 14400 Sunset Boulevard, where they partied together, and Wilson spoke of his following of the Maharishi, and the women spoke of their own spiritual guru, a man they called Charlie. Wilson let the two women stay at his house when he left to go to a recording session. When he returned at 3 a.m., he was met in his driveway by a man who introduced himself as Charles Manson. They walked inside Wilson's home, which was now occupied by about a dozen members of the family, mostly women. Over the course of the night, Manson played and sang songs, and Wilson was mesmerized by him. The family occupied Wilson's home for the next several weeks. This was where Tex Watson was introduced to the family as well. Earlier in the year, Tex had picked up Wilson hitchhiking. The two quickly bonded and became friendly. Tex stayed at Wilson's mansion from time to time, and it was during this period Tex had met Manson, and like Wilson, had become entangled in his web of drugs and women. Dennis Wilson footed the bill for the family during their stay, totaling over $100,000, for things like cash, dental work, and other medical bills, cars, clothes, food, and penicillin shots for the constant cases of gonorrhea. It was here that Manson played a song he wrote called "Cease to Exist," and Wilson was impressed. Over the next several weeks, Wilson would introduce Manson to a plethora of insiders to help jumpstart his career. Manson met singer Neil Young, who called Manson an improvisational genius, and a talent scout named Greg Jacobson, who wanted to feature Manson, his music, and his family in a documentary. But there were others who met Manson and could see through the bullshit. Fellow Beach Boy Mike Love thought Manson was creepy, and Terry Melker, a producer for Columbia Records and son of the actress Doris Day, was wary of Manson and eventually refused to record him and canceled a meeting scheduled at Melker's home, located at 10050 Cielo Drive. Still, Wilson went out of his way to pull strings in order to give Manson a chance at a record deal. Wilson set up a recording session with the Beach Boys label, Brother Records. Manson recorded several tracks, but the session ended badly when Manson allegedly pulled a knife on the studio engineer in a fit of frustration. As the weeks pushed on into the summer of '68, Wilson himself began to grow tired of Manson and the family. He repeatedly asked them to leave his home, and when they refused, Wilson walked away, leaving the house, all of its possessions, and the family behind. This act would lead to several run-ins between the two, in which Manson would threaten the lives of Wilson's children. To add insult to injury in their exceedingly souring relationship, Manson's song, "Cease to Exist," which was at one time promised to be on the next Beach Boys album, with a writing credit given to Manson, was added as a B-side to their album 2020, but the name of the song was changed to "Never Learn Not to Love." Wilson also changed some of the composition, and Manson was never given credit. Manson, now living on an old movie set called Spahn Ranch with the family, began to spiral into paranoia. Spahn Ranch, owned by a blind, elderly man named George Spahn, was once a movie set used for Western-themed movies and television shows such as Bonanza, The Lone Ranger, and Zorro, as well as a low-budget softcore porn titled Ram Rider, in which current family member Catherine Scher and future family member Bobby Beausoleil co-starred. George had been a successful milk farmer from Pennsylvania when he, his wife, and their 11 children packed up and moved to California, leaving the business behind. He purchased the ranch in 1953, and his livestock business thrived. He added children's pony rides, horses for trail riding, and rented out areas of the 55-acre ranch for traveling carnivals. George met a young, spirited carnival worker named Ruby Pearl, who stayed with him to care for the horses and upkeep, and soon became his lover. His wife, growing tired of the ranch and George's infidelity, took their 11 children and moved back to Pennsylvania, though they never divorced. When George passed in 1974, he and his wife were still married. By the time the family moved on to Spahn Ranch in 1968, it was a shadow of its old self, falling into disrepair, and was solely used as a place visitors could rent horses to ride through the trails. It became known as a place where the downtrodden and homeless could live in exchange for upkeep of the property, though not much upkeep was being done. Manson and George came to an agreement that for him and the family to live there, they would care for the property and for the aging George Spahn himself. Manson divvied up the responsibilities of cooking and cleaning to the women of the family, and the men would maintain the more laborious tasks, such as building repairs and caring for the horses, along with Ruby Pearl, who had since had a falling out with George, but stayed at the ranch. Lynette Fromm was given the task of caring for George, essentially becoming a de facto wife, responsible for cleaning Spahn's residence, cooking for him, and having sex with him, although other members were also tasked with giving him sexual favors to keep George happy. It was George Spahn who gave Lynette her nickname of Squeaky, for the sound she made when Spahn ran his fingers up her thigh. The location of Spahn Ranch was perfect for Manson, who used its isolation from the real world for total mind control. According to Manson prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi, there were no newspapers, no clocks, and the family was cut off from the rest of society. Manson created in this timeless land a tight little community of his own, with its own value system. It was holistic, complete, and totally at odds with the world outside. Spahn Ranch became Manson's kingdom, where he controlled his people with acid trips, orgies, and hypnotic lectures of what a perfect society would be like, but only if they followed him and his word. The family would go on excursions, or creepy crawlies, as they called them, where they would go to area towns and steal from houses, cars, and whatever else they could get their hands on. Sometimes they would just break into people's homes and move things around to frighten the owners. To the common person, this would seem like a bunch of hooligans creating trouble, but it goes deeper than that. Manson wasn't common, and these creepy crawlies were a way to train his family as his paranoia began to settle in. Manson, still angered by his fallout with Dennis Wilson in the music industry, had a plan in mind, and it came from the Beatles' White Album, within the song Helter Skelter. Manson dreamed of being a rock star with notoriety, money, fame, and women, but this was all crumbling before him. He instead piggybacked onto the Beatles' fame, using their music and words to inspire his people. During their nightly gatherings in which Manson would preach to his followers, he began playing and singing Beatles music and essentially interpreting their lyrics into his own gospel. Over time, he would persuade his acid-tripped commune that only he could translate the subliminal messaging within the songs, and if they were to follow his word, they would rise as leaders of a new world. Helter Skelter would be an uprising in which they would create a race war. Manson, a white supremacist, hated black people and viewed the race as violent savages. He believed that black people would be victorious in the race war because of their savagery, but they would be unfit to lead themselves after. So he and his family would hide at their Death Valley sanctuary at Barker Ranch, where they would morph into winged elves and other fantastic creatures and arise after the race war to claim their supremacy over the blacks. In order for this to happen, a series of events needed to conspire. Murders of rich white women to be framed as being committed by black men. On August 8th, 1968, it was time. He pulled Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel aside and instructed the women to do as Tex tells them. Then he said to Tex, "Leave a sign. Something witchy." Charles Manson has always stated that he never knew who his real father was. because his mother was sent up from Kentucky to Cincinnati, Ohio to be placed in what I would assume to be a home for unwed mothers. Which wasn't uncommon.
such an old-timey thing.
Which wasn't uncommon during the 1930s. However, Manson's mother states that he did, in fact, have a relationship with him and would spend many weekends at his home when Charles and his mother returned to Kentucky. She claims that the two maintained a relationship up until Colonel Scott's death in 1955. Manson went through a lot of mixed messages when he was a child after his mother was sent to prison. He bounced around between grandparents, aunts, uncles, you name it. Now, his grandparents were fanatically religious, hence them shipping his mother up to the unwed mother's home. So young Manson would live by strict rules when he stayed with them. Okay? Follow exactly what I tell you to say, to do. He bounced from one uncle who thought that Manson was too feminine to be a boy. So he dressed him in girls' clothes when he went to school. And then he bounced to another uncle that allegedly blew himself up in a moonshine still because the local government was about to take his land. Fuck you.
Go out with a bang.
Yeah.
Well, that's such a hippie thing to do too.
Yeah.
Blow yourself in a moonshining accident.
So after his mother was released, she began dating a man who didn't want any children. So she sent Manson to a school for boys in Indiana.
So unfortunate.
Yeah.
So unfortunate.
I mean, well, from the story, his mother,
of course,
wasn't
all there.
Mother type. So he ran away from the school for boys in Indiana and was arrested for stealing a bike. Now, for this, Manson was sent to Father Flanagan's Boys Town, where he ran away from there just after 4 days.
I would run away from Father
Flanagan.
Father Flanagan's Boys Town. I don't know what was going on there, but I can promise you it probably was something shady.
Come sit on Father Flanagan's lap there.
Come receive the body of Christ.
Yeah.
And the blood. All right,
I bless you. Ski. So he stole a car and committed several robberies before getting caught, and was then sent to the Indiana School for Boys. Now, Manson has stated it was here that he was raped repeatedly by the other boys, and once again he escaped and stole a car. He crossed state lines with the vehicle, which now made it a federal crime. So over the following 4 years after that, he was sent to 4 different correctional facilities. Throughout Manson's prison stay, he was continuously monitored by psychiatrists. In 1951, he was characterized as an extremely sensitive boy who has yet not given up in terms of securing some love and affection from the world. In 1952, he was deemed dangerous with homosexual and assaultive tendencies.
Crazy. 1952, that's such a 1950s diagnosis of someone's psyche.
Yeah.
Oh, the fact that they even put those together is wild.
Yeah.
Homosexual and assaultive tendencies.
Yeah.
Like, what? Wow.
Yeah, it's like two in the same.
That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Let's give him a lobotomy.
1955, he was said to have an unstable personality, but has the potential to straighten himself out. Oh, good for him. Hopefully it works out well. It doesn't. In 1956, a psychiatrist noted that Manson was unable to control himself and has a tendency to cut. Manson's behavior was erratic and moody, and he was a classic textbook case of a correctional institute inmate, as noted in 1958. Now, in 1961, he was labeled as an energetic person who hides his loneliness, resentment, and hostility behind a facade of superficial ingratiation.
What a amazing statement right there, by the way. I love that.
1963, Manson was said to be emotionally insecure and tended to involve himself in various fanatical interests. And finally, in 1966, the psychiatrist wrote that Manson was in need of a great deal of help in the transition from institution to the free world.
Wow. The warning signs were all there.
You think? I don't know. I think he could have turned out to be an alright guy.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
I mean, at the same
he was doomed
time,
from the fucking start.
I agree, but he was also, like, I mean, what we learned this later on in the story is he's extremely intelligent. He could talk somebody into doing anything.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's single traits that cult leaders have that the ability to convince someone to follow you blindly. It's a trait that only a certain people have, and there's so much potential with that trait to use for good. That once you get a little taste, so you could make somebody do whatever you want.
I mean, I could tell you right now,
it goes south real fast.
You could probably take every single politician that's in government right now, and they could make a fucking cult leader. Just the way that they talk, you know.
I mean, who's going to Nancy Pelosi's farm and living in a polygamous relationship with? No, because actually, she does got some milkers, dude.
Yeah, she does.
She got them Nancy Pelosi fun bags. All right, go ahead.
All right, so next up was Mary Brunner. Now, with Mary, there's not much known about her early life other than when and where she was born, her college education, and where she was working when she met Charles Manson. Now, she was the first one to join Manson in his life of orgies, drugs, and crime, and she was Manson's number one and the first to bear a child in a growing family. She was referred to as Mother Mary, a sign of respect by the others in the family regarding her status in the group. Next up to join the family was Lynette Fromm. She was born in Santa Monica, California, though she grew up in Westchester. Lynn was the first of 3 children. She was a talented, well-liked child that toured throughout the United States and Canada in a song and dance troupe called the Lariats. In junior high, Lynette was active with many after-school activities. She was a member of the Athenian Honor Society as well as the Girls Athletic Club. In her drama class, Lynn befriended a young Phil Hartman. Remember him? It's SNL. He was shot by his wife. You remember Phil Hartman?
No.
Oh, well.
I'm surprised too, because I'm pretty savvy with SNL cast members, even the old ones.
I'm trying to think of what movies he was in. He played a character.
Okay, I've seen it. I got to see a picture. If I see a picture, I guarantee you I would know who he is.
When her class gave out superlatives, Lynette was voted Personality Plus. As Lynette grew older, the relationship between her and her father grew apart. Neighbors remembered her father as a tyrant who seemed to punish Lynette for little or nothing at all. In high school, Lynette became more rebellious, using drugs and alcohol. She worked in a canvas shop where co-workers would see Lynn burn herself with lit cigarettes and shoot staples into her forearm with a staple gun. After high school, Lynette bounced around, living with different people. She eventually moved back to home and enrolled at El Camino Junior College. It wasn't long before Lynette and her father were fighting again. The two got into a fight over a definition of a word. And it was the last straw for Lynette. Again, she hit the road, and it was this time that Lynn met Charles Manson on Venice Beach. Impressed by Manson, she quickly decided to leave Los Angeles to travel with Charlie and Mary Brunner. Now, Lynette had a special spot in the family. No one but Manson was allowed to sleep with her.
Was she the best looking one?
I'm not going to tell you the best looking one.
Come on. I got to see him.
It's creepy.
Oh, no. I wonder why she was the...
I don't know. He just had this special thing for her, I guess. Now, at Spahn's ranch, Fromm spent most of her time taking care of George Spahn, the blind 80-year-old owner. Lynette would make squeak-like noises when George ran his hands up her legs, so he called her Squeaky, which name stuck.
Hey, maybe you want to give me a sponge bath?
Yeah, come here, drink it.
It's time for my sponge bath.
Make sure you get deep in those crevices.
Ugh.
All right, so next up is Susan Atkins, who is known as the scariest of the family for her willingness to do whatever Manson asked of her. And she took a great deal of pride doing so. When the family was able to get a hold of fake IDs, Manson gave Susan the name Sadie Glutz. So, when you hear different aspects of the stories, you'll hear Susan and you also hear Sadie. It's the same person. Prior to meeting Manson, she served 3 months in prison in Oregon for a series of armed robberies she committed when 2 escaped convicts she met at the coffee house where she worked. Upon her release, she managed to make her way to San Francisco and worked as a topless dancer. Susan was always the happiest when the family would go on creepy crawler missions, when they would break into people's homes and steal whatever they could. Now,
she was a ride or die.
Yeah,
she was a ride or die.
She's like,
there's a reason why they said she was the scariest of all of them.
There was nothing of value. They would rearrange items within the house to freak out the homeowners.
Yeah, there's a trend in all these family members too. they all lived wild lives, just like wherever wherever the path took them, just jump in a van and find out where to go.
Yep.
And it's you never see that nowadays. Like
Right.
I mean, the 60s, that especially the late 60s was such a crazy carefree time.
Yeah, you'll see all of these people. They had parent issues, daddy issues. They were heavily into drugs, and a lot of them had no direction in life, which is
exactly
the
where
perfect scenario.
Because I feel like everybody's looking for a little bit of direction in life.
Right.
You don't want to. It's a natural feeling to fight that, but I think you always kind of fall in line.
Yeah, I mean, if a woman or basically anybody, because there's guys that's involved in this as well.
Yeah.
You know, they're down on their luck. Their shit's not going their way. They're at their last straw, and all of a sudden, this guy just comes along. And you're like,
hey, everything's gonna be all right.
I can make everything
You follow me?
beautiful. We're gonna live a beautiful life of roses and puppies.
Fuck, I want to remember what the quote was. It's from the documentary that HBO put out of Doe and T, the Comet fucking cult. What was it called? Heaven's Gate. It was from that documentary, and it was a psychologist talking about what but the way she worded it was so well, and I'm so fucking pissed that I forgot what it says. But she said basically like opportunity, it takes it doesn't matter if you're smart, intelligent, very successful people fucking gave up their entire families and lives. Like it's not just these hippies. It has all these things have to happen, and it's like opportunity, just like fucking the thing, Jeopardy, opportunity, this and that.
Yeah.
Forgot how she worded it, but it was so good, and I'm pissed that I can't think of it. But because I feel like Manson kind of took advantage of hippies on their will, but that's not the only people that end up falling in cults.
Right.
I mean, let's look at organized religion.
Yeah.
We're not gonna go there, but yeah. All right, go ahead, keep going.
So Susan's persistence for Manson's attention would cause rifts within the family, including Manson himself. She was reportedly kicked out of the family for a while, which would just fuel her desire for Manson's acceptance. She was often blamed for the family's never-ending bouts with gonorrhea, as she was known.
Hey, orgies, what are you gonna do?
Well, she was known to be one of the more enthusiastic members who participated in these drug-fueled orgies.
Come on, guys.
Yeah, let's start one right now.
Come on.
Who wants to fuck?
She's coaching.
Yeah.
She's over here.
All right, you go with it.
Yeah.
On October 7th of 1968, Susan gave birth to a son. Manson was the one who actually named the boy, and he named him Zezozisi Zadfrak.
Of course.
Many have speculated that Manson was the father, but Susan claims the father to be a short-term family member by the name of Bruce Van Hall. But, I mean, in reality, no one could actually be sure who the father was.
Yeah.
Next is Patricia Krenwinkel. She was born December 3rd, 1947 in Los Angeles, California. Her parents divorced when she was 17 years old, and at the time, Pat stayed in California with her father, while her mother moved to Alabama. After high school, Pat moved to Alabama to live with her mother and attend a Catholic college. She had taught Sunday school in the past and had thought about becoming a nun. But after only one semester, she had enough and dropped out. I guess that was too culty for her.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? That's so ironic. Becoming a nun is a little crazy, but let's join a cult. It's, I mean, hand in hand, right?
So she moved back to California, where she moved in with her half-sister, Charlene, and got a job as a processing clerk. In September of 1967, she met Lynette Fromm, Mary Brunner, and Charles Manson. After making love with Charlie, Patricia decided to go with him, the girls, to San Francisco, leaving her car and her final paycheck behind.
Guy had the ultimate Riz, man.
Yeah.
No, Wizard of Oz right now.
Not only did he talk her into joining the cult, he was on the very first day of meeting. Like, come over here and
In the van.
christen you into the family. Now, with the family, Patricia exhibited a quiet but intense personality. She helped take care of the family's children and was extremely devoted to Charlie. Next was... What was it next? We'll talk about one of the first men to join the family, and that's Charles Denton Watson, who is known as Tex. And anybody familiar with the story, they know who Tex is.
Mm-hmm.
He was born on December 2nd, 1945 in Dallas, Texas. He was the youngest of 3 children and grew up in the small town of Cokeville, Texas. By his own accounts, he had a happy childhood looking up to his parents who ran a gas station in town. The Watsons were church-going people. And as Charles got older, he became more involved with church activities. In high school, he was an honor roll student and held some of the town's sports records. He played football, basketball, track. During his junior year, Watson became an editor for the school newspaper. Now, things started to change when Charles went away to North Texas State University in 1964. His grades started to slip as he became more interested in girls and booze. That happens to the best of us.
I mean, that's probably 60 to 70% of college people.
Mine started I
was going to say, mine freshman year of high school, man.
I'm like, what is all this? Through a roommate, Charles got a job as a baggage boy for Braniff Airlines, and one of the perks were free flights. And once in a while, he would take a girl to Hawaii for the weekend.
I mean, it's a move. That is a power move.
That is a power move.
He knew exactly how to do it.
It was around this period when he began smoking marijuana and experimenting with other drugs. His senior year, he decided to go to California to visit a frat brother. Impressed with it, Charles came back to Texas, only to tell his parents he was moving out west. Now, in California, Watson signed up for classes at Cal State and got a job as a wig salesman in Beverly Hills. He lived a few different places. First, there was an apartment in Silver Lake. Then he moved to Laurel Canyon. He messed up his knee in a car accident, which kept him out of the Army. I guess he was going to sign up for the Army. And then he dropped out of school. He moved to Malibu, where he opened up a wig shop with his roommate. It turned out to be a disaster, closing only a few months after opening. To pay the rent, Watson began dealing pot full time. Now, here's where everything gets connected. Tex, he picked up Beach Boy Dennis Wilson while he was hitchhiking, and Wilson invited him back to the mansion. Watson visited the house several times and ended up living there for the summer. Charles Manson and the family were regulars at Wilson's mansion, and within time, Watson wanted to join, giving them all of his possessions.
There's the switch too of, it doesn't take. It's not just people that are lost have nothing that join cults. This guy had a lot of money. It all depends.
Yep, and I think at that time too. I mean, I'm thinking like
he was willing. You understand? He was willing to give up everything he had for the family within a week of meeting this person.
Yep,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing the power that they Manson.
Like, I'm trying to put myself in that time period, in that situation, and if I have a failed business and basically I'm just living off of money that I'm selling drugs, and I see this guy with 12 women who are all willing to have sex with me. It's a pretty
Are you saying, are you going down the narrative that it was more of him like, show me your ways,
like, show me your ways of how to attract
at that same time though, this was the strange thing for me about Wilson, right? Watson. This is the strange thing about Watson to me is men in that position in the late 60s, they would have looked at that gang of hippies and been like, God damn, this was a successful businessman. He had money.
Yeah.
He fits the bill for that, that anti-hippie establishment,
right?
Rhetoric that these guys would come back in.
He had a good family, good upbringing.
So he's the most interesting one to be sucked into the family because,
and he's one of the most notorious behind Manson.
Of course, and that one will always he will always be the one that isn't supposed to be there for me.
Right. Now, he did make a statement years later. He said, "For years, I struggled to accumulate all I could. The right car, the right clothes, the right things that would somehow complete what I thought was missing inside of me. Mm-hmm. Now I gave everything I had to Charlie, and suddenly I felt free."
So strange.
It
makes sense, though. Yeah. It doesn't matter what they...
I mean,
how many times do people, tell you, money, money can't buy you happiness.
Right.
Money can't fill that void that's in your space. So maybe, living in a hippie commune.
I mean, I always think every now and then, like, I just want to like go off the radar and just, I can't give things up.
No,
I
I am a material girl living in a material world. Let me tell you.
I like things.
Yes, yeah. I will say this though: if I was born, I'll never know how I would be if I was born in a different time period. I always joke around with you too. I mean, you tell me I wouldn't survive the 80s. If I was 22, 23 years old during the 80s, I wouldn't have made it through.
Yeah.
I would have been in the clubs partying. Oh, so you never know. 1969, I know myself. I would have been a hippie.
Yeah.
I would have been there on Venice Beach hanging out with everybody. That's just how my personality is.
Yeah.
So who knows?
So when they made it to Spawn's Ranch, Charles Watson, he was given the name Tex by George Spahn. So they handed out nicknames, I guess.
Yeah.
I wonder if he rubbed his hand up his leg too. So he lived with the family throughout the fall of 1968, of course, enjoying the girls and the drugs, but he decided to leave in the end of November. Tex moved to Hollywood. He met a girl named Luella, and the couple made a good living selling drugs. Tex bought expensive clothes and even began having his hair styled. Luella ended up becoming pregnant and had to go down to Mexico to have an abortion. In March of 1969, Tex decided to go back to the family. This is a fateful decision. Things had changed since he left. People were now a lot more serious and paranoid, rather than the carefree, sex and drug-loving commune he once knew. In April, he was arrested in Van Nuys for public intoxication. He was high on belladonna, slithering on his hands and knees through a crowd of children, saying beep, beep, beep.
The unfortunate thing about this, especially the family in general, the Manson family, is they, after the murders, I mean, we'll get down to that later, is they use, like, it was such a pro-anti-drug movement because of the Manson family and what happened. Right. And they blamed drugs for all of this, and it added to the legislation that came after with psychedelics and all that stuff. And it's unfortunate that they didn't blame the crazy people that were in the family. The Manson himself, who was a legitimate cult leader at the time, absolutely, and it was all blamed on LSD.
Yeah. Well, as we talked in the story earlier, he was a pimp.
Yeah.
When he was out from prison, he was actually pimping women. Yeah. Which, I mean, you could kind of turn around and say it's similar to being
a cult leader, yeah.
Because he did use these women to get he used these women to seduce, basically seduce Dennis Wilson, from the Beach Boys. To basically live out of his house and spend hundreds of $1,000s on the family, for their gonorrhea treatments. Courtesy of Sadie. That's one thing she gave to the family. Yep. It's the gift of love there. All right.
So you could argue, I mean, gonorrhea is a gift of love. Yeah. Just showing your interest.
Sometime in the spring or summer of 1969, both Manson and Tex went out looking for people to murder. I guess now they're escorted. They ended up at a casino waiting for people to come out. Tex, with a knife in his hand, came upon two elderly women in their car. And just in the nick of time, the women sped away. But Manson and Watson gave two of them chase for about 15 minutes before giving up.
I can't wait until we get into further on in the story. We can actually really talk of because after hearing that statement that they switch and all of a sudden start going, you don't really understand why, and the messages that Manson was giving them and the paranoia that he was giving them about why they decided to start murdering people out of nowhere. And it gets so wild.
It does. And like I said, this episode here is just an introductory, getting to know who the characters are and where they came from and how they could have possibly been swayed, by Charles Manson. The next one here is Leslie Van Houten. Leslie was born on August 23rd, 1949 in Los Angeles. She and her older brother grew up in a typical middle-class household. Leslie's father was an automotive auctioneer, and her mother, Jane, was a school teacher. After Leslie, there were two more additions to her family. adopted a young boy and girl that had been orphaned in Korea. In 1963, Leslie's parents divorced, Paul moved out, and the children stayed with Jane. Meanwhile, Leslie began attending Monrovia High School, where she was twice elected homecoming queen. Dude, this is like the interesting thing.
Yeah.
You know? Some people, you know, they have like a shitty childhood. And
she was a homecoming queen. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's all if you're missing some sort of void, some sort of like establishment.
Now, like many at the time, she discovered hallucinogenic drugs, and her grades soon started to slip. She drifted away from her extracurricular activities and shortly after got pregnant and was forced by her mother to have an abortion. After graduating high school in 1967, Leslie moved in with her father and began attending business college. She began gravitating towards spiritualism and planned to live in a yoga spiritual community. In the summer of '68, Leslie was visiting friends in San Francisco when she met Catherine Scher and Bobby Beausoleil, who we'll discuss later. She began traveling with them, and in September, they took her to meet Charles Manson at Spawn's movie ranch. He returned to their ranch 3 weeks later, and this time she didn't leave. Like others in the family, Leslie became devoted to Manson. And according to her, she says, I was absolutely intrigued and mesmerized by Manson, and I believed that he was someone very special and extraordinary. Bobby Beausoleil, the first of 5 children. Bobby was born in Santa Barbara, California in 1947. Bobby displayed an interest in music at a very young age and eventually taught himself how to play the guitar. When he was 16, he had an affair with his cousin's wife. Cousin left. Now, young Bobby, 16 years old, was forced to play the role of husband, working for a trailer company to support his cousin's wife and child. After the death of his grandmother, Bobby moved out and went to Los Angeles. There, he briefly played in a band called Grassroots. Now, Grassroots would later achieve fame under the name Love. Never heard of him, but Bobby also became friends with Frank Zappa and could be heard as a backup singer on Zappa's first record, Freak Out. You're Frank Zappa? You might be a little too young.
Yeah, I'm a little too young for that one.
Yeah, Zappa was like a 60s, 70s psychedelic singer.
Artist.
Yeah.
Speaking of artists, isn't it amazing? Isn't it crazy that Manson would have had a song that was on the Beach Boys album? The Beach Boys. That's crazy.
You can actually go on YouTube and hear all of Manson's songs, like his original music. Because sometime in the 70s, somebody actually produced recordings that Manson had did and made an album. So he has like, I don't know, 7, 8 songs out there. You know, you can actually pull up.
All right, we're going to use it for the intro and the outro of this episode. Who gets the rights?
Yeah.
Who gets the view money from that?
Yeah. Now, if you take his song "Cease to Exist" and put it side by side with
Never Learn Not to Love.
"Never Learn Not to Love" by the Beach Boys, they're basically the same exact song.
Yeah.
Now back to Bobby. The city of Angels proved to be too superficial, so he traveled north and fell in love with the Bay Area. In San Francisco, Beausoleil began playing with a band called The Outfit, but eventually dropped out and started his own band called Orchestra. They played throughout the Bay Area from 66 to 67, and they ended up breaking up. At this time, Bobby met a filmmaker named Kenneth Anger. They worked together on a film called Lucifer Rising, which never basically fell apart and never really made it out. In the fall of 1967, Beausoleil once again found acting work and was featured in a soft porn titled Ramrodder.
Wait, it's not. You can't name a softcore porn Ramrodder.
I know.
That's not. It's got to be a full blown production right at that point.
Right. The movie was filmed near Spawn's Movie Ranch and also starred Manson family member Catherine Scher. Bobby was living in the basement of a man named Gary Hinman, who will become a focal point in the story later on, at his Topanga Canyon home, where he first ran into Charles Manson and the family. Bobby's musical talent impressed Charlie and the girls, and Bobby was welcomed into the family. So there's another one. You know, maybe he didn't have like the greatest, you know, they had like a typical upbringing, you know, but he had aspirations. He was playing in bands. He was basically filming movies and you know.
Well, yeah, he's content creating.
Yeah. Oh God, what does that say for us?
Want to start a cult?
Yeah.
I don't have the it.
You don't have the.
I don't have it. I can tell you this: I would never join a cult. That's for sure. I know for a fact I wouldn't. I would laugh at like somebody who was like, "I'm the Almighty. I have it all."
Please follow me.
Oh, imagine the smell in that fucking ranch,
bro.
Could you imagine?
No.
Patchouli soap, unwashed armpits, and they're just all sitting around fucking, yeah, dude, play that fucking song, you know, man. Oh, and it's just, they're all like
making love when they haven't showered.
yeah,
like,
oh god, Harry.
Time.
Probably smells. Actually, in the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is it's not the story of them, but it's Quentin Tarantino's like take on the Manson murders and the Manson family. They have nothing to do with it. They're just part of the movie. But he does a great job of showing the ranch and like how disgusting it was in the movie. Like there's overflowing dishes, like weird rock crystals all over the place.
Oh,
it's just ugh.
No,
the flies were so bad on the door. I don't remember if you've seen the movie, but they when they open the door, like a tsunami of flies come flying out.
Tsunami.
They're just loving life, man.
Now, when you get a second, go in. There's a website that I got some of this information from. It's called CharlesManson.com, and there's a link for the family, and it shows all of their arrest photos. Mm-hmm. And these people are looking rough.
Yeah,
I mean rough. Their hair's all mangled, and better be right in smack dab in the center of that orgy. Huh?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, just take it all in.
So move your butts around. Stop climbing over me.
What? Good Lord, is that smell?
That's what I mean. You're like, this guy is probably intrigued. How are all these girls hanging around? I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that family.
No, I'd be like, all right, I can't. I'm sorry. I've had enough.
Yeah,
I'm going.
Yeah, I'm gonna go try to figure out the real world life.
I'm gonna go find a shower. Yeah. Actually, that's what I want to find. All right,
fucking hippies.
So. Next up is Linda Kasabian. She was actually one of the ones who was directly involved with the murders. But she was more of the getaway driver because she was the only one that had a driver's license.
Just by default, she's a getaway driver.
Yeah. She ended up meeting a woman. She's like, hey, there's this hippie commune, a safe and happy, place where people can get away from the establishment.
Yeah.
The establishment was big in the 60s.
Yep.
So she's like, all right, I'll check it out, and it was the Manson family. And again, it was inspired by the message that Charles Manson was preaching.
He's just sitting in his recliner.
Oh, yeah. Sitting at the
group, just in sitting crisscross applesauce down on the floor. Just he's like
covered in flies.
Oh my god, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I never will.
Like if you walk into that room, okay, let's say that you're an outsider, and you walk into that room and you see Charles Manson sitting there on his throne or whatever he's doing, playing,
on his throne. It was a recliner.
just strumming his fucking guitar, and there's a bunch of people just like zoned out from LSD and everything. And like you said, the smell of the fucking room and whatnot, like I'd be like, maybe free love isn't such a good thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back with a capitalist over here.
Yeah, I'd like to pay a little bit for my love. So,
real quick, what was her last name?
Kasabian.
Yeah, Kasabian is Krenwinkel. She's the hairy leg girl from the photo. I'm looking at her right now.
And I think that's the one that nobody was allowed to have sex with. All right, now here's a figure. His name is Bruce Davis. He was born in Monroe, Louisiana, October 5th, 1942. He grew up in Mobile, Alabama, and was the youngest of two children. After high school, Davis attended college in Tennessee, but he dropped out after 2 years. Because he became immersed with the hippie counterculture. Now in the West, Davis made a living doing construction work, and in 1967 ran into Charles Manson, Mary Brunner, Lynette Fromm, and Patricia Krenwinkel in Oregon. Manson liked having another man around. Plus, he and Bruce had a few things in common. Davis was a good musician. He had an interest in Scientology. Okay, now that's going to be a key figure also.
Yes, for sure.
Scientology,
for sure.
And Davis was also an ex-con. So, from November of 1968 to April of 1969, Bruce moved away to London, England, where he was working at the Scientology headquarters. Davis was eventually kicked out of the organization due to his drug use, so he returned and rejoined the family. Davis acted as the comptroller. He was responsible for handling all of the stolen credit cards and fake IDs. Now, a lot of people, just at face value of the story of the murders, people would assume that Tex Watson was Manson's right-hand man. Yeah, but it was actually Bruce Davis.
It's strange too, because when you see pictures of Bruce, he doesn't look like he would belong in that commune, where Watson and Beausoleil kind of did.
So to wrap up the introductions, we're going to touch on morally questionable members of the group. They were a couple of underage women that were lured into the family by Charles Manson, which he would have sex with and pimp out for personal gain.
Oh, yeah. They were the seducers.
Yep. The first was Diane Lake. She was born in December of 1953. Her parents were prominent members of the Wavy Gravy's Hog Farm commune. From an early age, Diane was subject to both group sex and hallucinogenic drugs.
That's so sad that you're just born into that situation.
Yep. In 1967, just before her 14th birthday, Diane met the family at a home that they had called a Spiral Staircase, which was in Topanga Canyon. With her parents' permission, Diane Lake left to travel with the family. Charles Manson seemed to have it out for Diane, often beating her in front of others. I don't know what happened, what transpired, but because she was so young, she couldn't just up and leave.
Yeah. She was stuck.
Yeah.
And then jumping from hippie commune to hippie commune, that what a life.
And the second young girl was Ruth Ann Morehouse. She was born in Toronto, Canada on January 6, 1951. She first met Charles Manson in 1967 after her father, Dean Morehouse, who was a former minister, picked up Charles Manson hitchhiking. Charles had been traveling up and down the Pacific coast with Lynette Fromm and Mary Brunner. Dean welcomed the three into his home and preached to them over dinner. He gave Charlie a piano, which Manson traded towards a Volkswagen microbus, which he used for the family to do their traveling. Meanwhile, Charlie only had his eyes on one thing. Yeah, he was grateful for the piano.
Yeah, thank you. What? That's so shitty that you pull over someone to try to spread the word of God, and then he ends up stealing your fucking daughter.
Yeah, but Charlie only had eyes on young Ruth Ann and took her to Mendocino. When Dean found out, he vowed to kill Manson. However, Charlie calmed him down and introduced him to LSD, and they stayed at his house for a few weeks. While Dean thought Charlie was Christ-like, the mother, Mrs. Morehouse, didn't appreciate her husband's new house guests and left to live with her sister.
So yes. Using LSD as mind control. Manson was the head of the CIA at that point.
I know. I was going to say, was he a member?
We'll get to that later down the road. But he certainly knew how to talk to people when they were under the influence, too.
Oh, yeah. Was that MK Ultra?
MK Ultra, yeah.
Mind altering?
Yep.
Charles Manson visited the Morehouse home a few more times before he and the girls decided to travel down to Southern California. Before leaving, Charlie told Ruth Ann that she could come with them if she was married, and she would be emancipated from her family. And so she did. A few weeks later, she married a bus driver, and then immediately left him to join the family in LA.
That poor bus driver, man.
She began living with the family at various residences, including Spahn's Movie Ranch. The ranch's owner, George Spahn, gave her the nickname of Oowish, which is basically, it sounds like if a guy is whistling at a girl or a beautiful girl, is Oowish, Oowish. That was her nickname. Now, with the family, she went on garbage runs where the family would dig through supermarket dumpsters looking for food.
God.
She panhandled and she took care of the children. Her father, Dean, also spent time with the girls and turned into a worshiper of Manson himself. Her father.
It's amazing. It's amazing the pull this guy had.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dean and Ruth Ann also spent time together at Dennis Wilson's mansion while the family was living there. And Manson would, out in the open, having sex with his daughter. And Dean, her father, was so tripped out on LSD that it didn't even fucking faze him. So sad. And
free love.
And that was another thing, and then later on, Ruth Ann was one of the ones. Charles was a nice young girl, beautiful girl that he would pimp out for his own personal gains. So that's pretty much all the introductions. There's so many more family members, but a lot of them, although they're a part of the family and they all worship Charles Manson, they weren't I guess, in the inner circle.
Yeah, there was definitely like rankings in the family. Some of them even claimed that they weren't even allowed to speak to Manson.
Right.
You know, they had the introduction week or something. There was an introduction week, and they heard the word of Manson and this and that, and then they were sent off to do various tasks on the Spawn Watch. Yeah. They couldn't even stay. They couldn't even go in the main cabin at that point where Manson was, and they would still follow these people.
Fucking love him. Love this dude. I'll do anything for him.
Yep.
Even though I see him once every 3 weeks.
Yep.
That's crazy.
So, the inner circle was definitely the most loyal though.
So the next episode, we're going to go right into the Tate and LaBianca murders. And, now that we know who's who and what roles, they played within the family, it's definitely going to get fucking interesting.
Yes, for sure.
Real fucking interesting. And I told Garrett, at first, I'm not much of a Charles Manson connoisseur, So just like, reading what I've read about him and seeing movies and documentaries and stuff about Charles Manson, I don't know. The dude was just too out there for me. Yeah. Like I never really got into the whole thing. But, with Garrett's persistence, this is the Garrett story right here. This was definitely his thing. Now that I've looked more into it, this.
Oh man, just wait.
I'm glad you mentioned. I'm glad you wanted to do this.
I'm glad because you got lost in it for a second.
Oh yeah,
I know. When you were writing the story, you definitely got lost in it. I know you did.
I know. I saw Garrett at work, and I'm like, bro, there is just so twists and turns and people and this guy
alternate theories.
And it's like, wow. This is like a mind fuck, this whole fucking story.
Helter Skelter is one of the greatest stories ever written, and I'm using that in loosely. Obviously, right. It's a crazy. I think it was the turn of the time period too. With media being so accessible at that, it spawned legislation was made because of this.
Yeah,
it was a huge event. Band names were named after him. It's amazing that one. Cults already get so much fame because people don't understand. It's a misunderstanding of the situation, right. And that's why. And I think the Manson family was the original. They were the OG that started it, that put things on the map. And I feel like Manson gave a lot of these cult guys the idea, the blueprint. So,
yeah, it's definitely a very interesting story. So that'll do it for this episode. But before we go, if you like what you heard, go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a review. And do not forget to become an amazing criminal on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/criminalAF. Links to our support, socials, merchandise, and more are in the episode description. Now, signing off from Studio Chloroform, keep your head on a swivel and take care till next time. Now give me our theme music. See ya.